Welcome to Roots of Resilience on the Front Lines of Climate Justice, a podcast by the Global Forest Coalition. GFC is a feminist coalition of organizations around the world supporting forest conservation with a focus on gender justice, human rights, and social equity. In Roots of Resilience, we talk with coalition members and allies about what they're doing to advance real solutions to climate change and forest loss.
Welcome to our new episode of Roots of Resilience. I'm Chithira Vijayakumar, and I'm talking to you from India. Climate change can be a very overwhelming topic to learn about. There's so much going on, and sometimes it can feel like all the news we're hearing is terrible. For instance, South America is living through one of the most extreme climate events the world has ever seen, with unbelievable temperatures up to 39 degrees Celsius in mid-winter. June of this year, 2023, was also officially the hottest June ever recorded in human history. The ice in the Arctic Sea hit a record low, which is a very rare event. Sea ice is important because it helps to keep the Earth's climate stable, which is critical to protect our forests and the indigenous peoples and communities that depend on them. When sea ice melts, it causes further warming, which can cause more sea ice to melt. So it's a vicious cycle, basically. It also means that sea levels could rise even more, displacing millions of people, which will impact the most marginalized amongst us the most severely. So yeah, like I said, sometimes it feels like there is no good climate news. But our intention with this podcast is to change that. We at the Global Forest Coalition aim to give you hope and to show you that not only is change possible, it is already happening. In every episode, we will speak to environmental defenders all around the world who have been implementing real climate solutions in their regions through gender transformative ways. So whether you're a seasoned climate change activist or you're just starting to learn more about the issue, this podcast is for you. Join us as we explore the science, the stories, and the real solutions to climate change. First, we're going to go to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to meet Maureen Santos. Maureen coordinates the National Advisory Unit of FACE, a Brazilian NGO committed to organizing and developing local, community, and associative work. Maureen coordinates their National Advisory Unit to bring issues like climate justice and struggles against agribusiness and mining, all of this to the forefront, and connects the international agenda with the incredible work being done in the local territories of Brazil.
In the imagination of the world, a lot of the time, Brazil is deeply tied with the Amazon, is very interlinked with the rainforests. And I'd wager that in the majority of cases, when people think of the rainforest, they're thinking of trees, they're thinking of rivers, they're thinking of animals. But very, very rarely are they associating the rainforest with humans, with indigenous people who live there, who have lived there since time immemorial, right? So could you speak a little bit about that? Could you talk about why humans are an integral part of the forest ecosystem and how that has been playing out in Brazil?
Okay. Yeah, I just mentioned a little bit about this. And we have this, the indigenous people bring this. We don't have forests without peoples, you know. So in Brazil, the word, the sentence is very true. because when you arrive in these areas, the majority it's areas that belong to the state, or areas that belong to traditional communities and indigenous people. For we talk about not only for right now, but we talk about since the colonization. Now we have all this historical debt in Brazil about the land, who belongs this land, and same time during our last constitutions get right about the demarcation areas for indigenous people, and also to create laws to title the land also for the traditional communities. But when you go like for a conservation unity or other area that's already have a law for environmental protection, when you arrive there, you have or indigenous communities, all you have the traditional communities there. And it's important to say, because also I think the indigenous people is getting, especially in Brazil, is doing a very good job of visibility around the world, you know. So people already connect more Amazon related to them. But at the same time, the traditional communities as the quilombolas, the extrativistas, I don't know the words in English about their names, but you have in Brazil, it's so many, you know, it's so many different traditional communities who have their own culture, have their own way to take care of the land and ways of life, that it's completely invisible, not only for Brazilians, but also for outside. You really need to turn them visible, because you only have biodiversity and forests protected still in Brazil because you have indigenous people and traditional communities in the land. So it's very important when you talk about the guardians of the forests, you know, or guardians of the biodiversity, it's very important to recognize their presence in their territories. And because of that, there is a huge importance of the creation and the enforcement of laws that give them the rights to the land, you know? Because the rights to the land, it's fundamental. It's like the main pillar for climate change, to face the climate change crisis, to face the ecological crisis. Because where is this population is keeping the land, you don't have the advance of mining companies, agribusiness, energy infrastructures, and other kind of big corporate or state investments that destroy, and you lose the forests and also all that's included in that, you know. So there is this big connection that the world really needs to understand and to support, because still there is a lot of a romantical view about what nature is and about what is the forest and what is the Amazon. No, so Amazon without people is not really Amazon, and you need to put this visible as more you can.
Absolutely, there is a romantic idea of forests and what they look like. And they are reinforced every day through our mainstream media, in educational systems around the world, where there is a constant erasure of the lived realities of indigenous peoples and their incredible vast reserves of traditional ecological knowledge, and their expertise, right? So all around the world, so when we speak to different people around the world for this podcast, we hear about how, you know, on top of the existing challenges that people are facing on the ground from climate change, now people are also facing the additional burden of false climate change solutions. So people are, local communities and indigenous communities, particularly women and all the diversities in these communities, they're all facing the brunt of, say, offsets or plantations or n number of false solutions that are being promoted by some of the most, by the UN and by other international bodies, right? So what is the story in Brazil there when it comes to false solutions? What are some of the ones that are impacting you the most?
Yeah, we have a lot of false solutions that are calling in this group of the solutions made by corporations, made by specifically for agents that is destroying. Also, they be like recognized as the one that bring the solutions, no, to face their own problem that they create. We start here. We can start about the carbon market. That's is the main metric for all the architecture, this new architecture of the climate financing and the false solutions. We have this for decades already, but specifically in the last 15 years, we have they're more connected to the forest approach. So there is, we FASE, my organization, we are part of a Belém-led group that's a collective of social movements, unions, NGOs, and specialists that there is like 12 or 13 years that's bringing up this issue of against the offset, the forest offsetting, no? Because we really believe that this mechanism of carbon marketing in forests can bring much more pressure, not only to the peoples that live in this forest, but at the same time avoid that the public policies arrive in these places and change a lot of the way of life of this traditional indigenous population, because all these projects and private contracts bring them adjustments and also control and a lot of new rules that they need to follow up, and these rules change the way they live, you know, the way they treat the soil, the way they plant, the way they use the fire, the way they to make their agriculture, that's the traditional agriculture. At the same time, they ignore a lot of amazing traditional knowledge and practice as agroecology and others, no, that can be the real solutions, as we believe, you know. So I think the carbon market offsets the forest is one of the main ones, but you have now this lie of net zero, that's and the nature-based solutions that is the new trend inside the climate change regime. At the same time, you can see like all the corporations around the world in a lot of different areas already have their net zero targets. But when we really saw it, it's not really connected to the value chain of these corporation activities. It's more, you see one of other items related to energy efficiency or something like that, but the main changes, it's not really changes, no, it's based on projects of carbon removal. And this come back to the forests, come back to a spread of new monocultures as eucalyptus and other kind of tree plantations. And at the same time, projects in geoengineer that's a really, really worry, because you saw that you have a moratorium in the Convention of Biological Diversity against these experiments of geoengineer.
Yeah, I think that was a really good snapshot of how complex these issues are and how it's playing out in Brazil. We also like to remind our listeners that about the incredible work that grassroots land defenders and organizations like FASE are doing on the ground. So Could you share with us one of the most impactful ways, one of your favorite ways in which your organization has been able to intervene in this situation and make a difference?
We have a different actions. No, we have in more in a global negotiations that you do pressure and to our negotiators not to open up this kind of matter inside of the climate negotiations. And at the same time, there is a big issues related to the areas that we work with in the territories, because their populations is facing a lot of pressure of these corporations. So you are demanding all the time by the communities to do courses of capacity building, to talk about this kind of mechanism, so the communities can not only have the information about what is it, because when you bring the projects of forest offsets, carbon market offsets, they sell it as a great opportunity of receiving income and a lot of issues. And of course, you have a lot of communities that's facing a big and a huge situation of needs, different kind of needs, because we have to remember that to have one of the worst government you had in our story, recent story, that turned their back to the countryside of Brazil, and especially to the traditional and indigenous peoples. So of course, when you come to projects that bring a lot of money and say that, okay, you don't need to do anything, only need to keep whatever you are doing in the land, you receive all this money to take care and also to capture carbon, and bring this idea of a commodity that you can see, you can taste, you can smell. It's completely abstract, and it's very complicated to the communities understand what's going on. No, so all these demands of the communities to do talks about these issues, bring the perspectives and how it being in the national governance, international government, is very important tool today. First, understand this context, at the same time, deal with that, and also deal how to face this kind of proposals and pressures. And at the same time, they be more strong enough to dialogue with these proposals if they wish to that, because we always believe that the communities have autonomy about what their strategy is, what the way they are defending their lands, but you really need to focus in the information, the best information you can give to them, and show all these traps that these false solution projects bring to the communities. There are thousands of traps related to the private contracts, the time of concession, because sometimes it takes that 30 years, 50 years of the concession that they give in these contracts. At the same time, all these things that the contract created, like you played it like EMF, you have thousands of, I forget the word now, but when the EMF give money to the countries, they give a lot of really forget the word. Exigências. It's like, I don't know, the countries need to mold their attitude, to mold their policies, to adjust in the contracts, and it's the same for private contracts in the communities. So we are doing too many of these. Now you do the international work, you do this pressure to create a national law that really can have a system that can protect against this kind of distractions, but at the same time support the community to get strong enough to debate and have information to debate this kind of projects. At the same time, they have their own autonomy to say no if they wish to say no, you know. And for this, one of the very important tool that we're believing also for this debate is the OIT, the International Labor Organizations Convention 169, that there is the protocol that the community can write down about the free consulting, previous consulting, when you have any kind of projects that you have any impact in the territory, in the communities can write down in a protocol how they wish to be free and early consulting before the project starts, you know. And this tool is getting very important also to strengthen, to get more possibilities for the communities to defend itself.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there's the response needs to be from many directions, and FASE needs to more than anything supports the autonomy of the communities and works with the decisions made by the communities themselves. That's fantastic. If you could request from the international community, from the world that is listening to this podcast, one thing, if you could ask them for one thing which would, to create support for concrete climate actions, for a regenerative and for real climate solutions in Brazil, what would you ask of us? How can we support this?
I think first to give visibility for the own solutions that the communities bring, you know, and consider the traditional knowledge as the main knowledge you have, you know, because generally when you talk about climate change, you only talk about the formal and official science, but there is this millenary sciences in the communities, you know, that's it's very important to say that and give them all the space and all the visibility they need to spread the word that they have the real solutions. At the same time, for consumers, it's important to understand when they are carbon neutral for any activity, they are thinking they are carbon neutral, they really need to understand which place in this world that this neutrality is getting made, you know, because sometimes you buy some product or use an app of transportation, an app of deliver food, or you go to stay in a hotel, or you pay for carbon neutral your ticket, your air ticket. At the same time, you even care about where is this place, this corporation is doing projects to remove my carbon that I'm spending here. You really don't care about that. And sometimes, anyway, not sometimes, the majority of the cases, when you look, they're buying credits in regions that there is impact in the communities in the ground, in the communities in the biomes, in the territories, communities that have been pushed to enter in these horrible private contracts, communities that be pushing for their land and go to other places so they can, the companies can build a monoculture of any tree plantations to remove their carbon. So you have to make sure that all this debate of neutrality, where this come from, where these removals come from, and what is going on. Because if you don't have any kind of accountability, you keeping masqueraded, keeping creating fake solutions for middle class and people in the cities, but at the same time destroying the livelihoods in the forests and in the territories. So I think there is a huge responsibility for people in the cities, for people in the North countries that is bringing this, pushing this kind of policies that really believe that the climate crisis only it's a synonym of carbon reduction emissions, but it's not. Carbon crisis, it's part of an ecological crisis. It's much more than an issue. You have to think about this much more abroad, that you can really have social environment integrity about this kind of policies and measures.
That was a really vital point, Maureen, because I think a lot of the times when, like you said, people choose the carbon neutral hotel or the tickets, they feel like they're making a good decision, an ecologically sound decision. But those linkages between that and what it actually in reality transpires to on the ground is often deliberately hidden from us. It's hidden from people. And you are asked to stop thinking at that point. You're asked to stop thinking at the point that you click the button that says add to cart or buy this particular ticket or book this room. You are requested to stop thinking and just feel good and take that good feeling and leave. But you raised a critical point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maureen, for speaking with us today and telling us the realities and the complexities of what it means to do work of this nature in Brazil today. And also for reminding us why it is important to keep persisting, to never give up, even in the face of what looks like insurmountable difficulties. And for showing us how when we keep going, when we keep fighting, the results will be there. So thank you so much again.
You're listening to Roots of Resilience on the Front Lines of Climate Justice, a podcast by the Global Forest Coalition.
Now we're going to travel all the way to Uganda to meet Kureeba David. Kureeba is a senior researcher and an environmental, climate, and human rights activist who has led many campaigns against mining activities, agrofuels, monoculture plantations, and more. He also tracks and analyzes the United Nations program on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation in developing countries, otherwise known as RED projects in Uganda.
Thank you so much, David Kureeba, for joining us today in the middle of what has been, I think, a hectic year for you in terms of field visits and research and work. Thank you so much. We're so grateful that you made the time for us to join us on the podcast today. So when we talk about Uganda, it's one of those places in the world where I think most stories about Uganda that we hear today come to us through Western media outlets or through media outlets owned and operated by the global North, right? So the stories often, are become one-dimensional in a sense and might not actually capture a lot of the reality of life there. So how would you describe the country to somebody who has never been there?
Uganda is a country that is found in East Africa. Uganda is a very, very green country. Uganda used to be the part of Africa before environmental degradation came into play. Uganda is the current country that is turning into Nigeria because we have oil and gas mining. Uganda is one of those few countries that do rain-fed agriculture, and the natives in Uganda are very lovely. We have lots of wildlife. we had very vast forests, but now the challenge comes in with the current corporate capture, which brings in companies that do agribusiness, that do oil and gas mining. But generally, Uganda as a country, it wouldn't be that bad, but then the nature of activities that are being carried out are the ones that are really trying to kill the part of Africa. But Uganda is a country which everyone would have loved to actually visit, including all of you. You should come, pass by, and you see what we are talking about. It's actually still the Pearl, though with some kind of poor governance style that is killing the beauty, but it is a country that is in East Africa and worth actually visiting.
Yeah, definitely. This is, I hope to visit you all someday, as I'm sure most of our listeners as well. So you mentioned that Uganda is a very green country, but that also that there are a lot of environmental struggles, environmental degradation that is ongoing. Could you speak to us a little bit about that and whether climate change has, how climate change has impacted these existing issues?
Yeah, thank you very much. When I talk about environmental degradation, you'll talk about oil palm development in areas that used to be very green. We have oil palm establishment in Karangara, in Mvuma, and these are islands in the middle of the Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is one of the biggest freshwater bodies that serves about 10 countries that ends up in Egypt. So oil palm development is one key challenge that we have in this country. Then we have issues of flower farming by Rosebud in those international important areas, the so-called Ramsar sites, wetlands of international importance, and we see them happening. And of course, flowers are not food, but they are grown in wetlands. And wetlands, certainly, these are areas that wouldn't be destroyed. We are talking about carbon trading. For carbon trading, we have companies like Green Resources, which is actually in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Uganda, and it is into carbon trading. We have Plan Vivo, one of the activities that we have done on ground that actually uses community gardens, agrarian land, and they plant trees in the radius of 7 meters, and eventually the canopy covers the agrarian area, and people end up being food insecure. So there is an activity, also several activities on oil and gas mining. And we are constructing one of the longest pipeline from Uganda to Tanga in Tanzania, which is around 1,430 kilometers. So you can imagine it will be heated. So if you look at the area that it is going to cover, around 120, that is around 30 meters from Uganda up to Tanzania. It is running through wetlands, it is running through forests. You're talking about indigenous communities depending on forest. You're talking about communities depending on those wetlands where they're going to be visited. You are talking about even people's farmlands, and the pipeline will be running through all of those. And then also the activities of, for example, sugarcane plantations. Sugarcane plantations are actually encroaching on forests, on natural forests. And to us, that is also some problem of some sort in this country. If in this era we are talking about conservation, reducing emissions from degradation, forestation, forest degradation, and the country allows, for example, 21 miles of Bugoma forest. There is some Bugoma forest which is in the oil region being defaced, being disseminated for sugarcane growing by a company called Hoima Sugar. I think to us that is a very big setback in a country. And if you look at oil and gas mining in protected areas, in Murchison Falls, you will realize that even animals have been migrated to other areas, but others will certainly have challenges to survive because of the nature of establishment of oil and gas mining. If you are talking about the Tienga region, that is the Murchison landscape, which is mined by the Total company. So I had talked about the pipeline, which is going to be 1,430 kilometers from Uganda to Tanzania. It will go through wetlands, it will go through forests. So if you're talking about indigenous communities, certainly they will have to be displaced. Agrarian land will certainly be taken for pipeline. And this is a heated pipeline, and it's the longest because our oil is waxy. You are talking about establishment of electricity lines, road network for servicing the heating points. They will be like 27 or 27 points from here up to Tanzania. So all these, when you bring them together, they are a challenge. But also carbon trading business for small agricultural activities, small peasants, because you are convincing communities on ground to grow trees, and you pay them for the number of trees grown. Of course, the amount of carbon sequestered, certainly that is not something that is easily understood at local level. But people count trees, the acreage of your area. So now you find you are planting at the distance of 7 meters. But when these trees grow, the canopy on top does not allow sunshine to go through, and eventually communities become food insecure because now you find the communities can no longer grow food crops. These are especially annual crops below the canopy cover. So like Plan Vivo activities, which is promoted by Eco Trust in the very many districts of Western Uganda, Muchenyi, Koima, and other districts. So it becomes a very big challenge for communities, because that is the first solution. Emission reduction is not done from this point of at the recipient level. It is done from the source of production. So carbon trading promoted by Plan Vivo and the Eco Trust, but also promoted by Green Resources, a country that has, companies that have establishments in Mozambique, in Tanzania, and in Uganda, and largely they encroach on forest reserves. So those are some of the few examples that I could give. There are very many, if I could give them, but those are the major ones that are leading, causing environmental degradation.
It sounds like not only are there challenges from climate change, for instance, and ongoing ecological challenges from that, but that they are being worsened and deepened by corporate capture of the non-renewable energy sector and enormous infrastructural non-renewable energy projects like this oil pipeline, which are obviously going to be devastating to the environment, as well as these so-called solutions to climate change that are being introduced, like plantations and carbon capture. And like you rightly pointed out, the real work of cutting emissions is being sidelined, is being completely ignored, and all of the rest is being, the energy is being diverted to these false solutions, which are in fact making things worse. So in this scenario, there are so many challenges, it sounds like. So how are people, including you and, including experts and land defenders like you and your organization, how are you responding to this massive crisis? In what way is your organization able to intervene in this very, I'm sure, complex scenario?
I think you have used the right word, complex. Complex is the word. Complex because corporations rule African countries. I must tell you that some of these companies are even more powerful than our government, because they decide what to be done, what to be followed, where development should be taken, and what ecological setup needs to be destroyed. So, like we said, complex. It is true, but of course we need to fight. This is the only country. We have only one Uganda to live in. At the moment, we don't show that we have interest, or we can say something or defend. Once we lose it, it goes once and for all. So what do we exactly do? First of all, is to do community awareness. I think that is primarily the first thing to do, because all these developments happen in communities, and it is communities that feel some of this pressure the more, because they are the ones who lose land. They are the ones who actually lose some educational schools, because they are even shifted. or they make community shift and they have to move very long distances. So awareness on the dangers related to plantation agriculture. That is one thing that we do. I think community awareness, community consciousness, FPIC, free, prior, informed consent, we strongly advise and work with communities to ensure that for any development, for any project to take root, they must be consulted, that they must consent. But they also appreciate that there is climate change, and most of these projects will finish, but communities might still be there. If we are talking about oil palm lasts for only 25 years, and these companies are given tax waiver of close to 20 years. So they have 5 years of probably working with them. But what will happen? So we strongly work with communities, first of all, to one, appreciate that they need to always understand the kind of contracts that these companies sign. They need to understand the nature of employment that these companies give them. They also need to understand that they have one earth, they have one country, that the moment it gets challenges, the moment soils die, the moment biodiversity is lost, the moment all tree cover is lost and climate change has hit them hard and kill everything around them, they are the ones to suffer the most. So that is on the point of creating awareness. But we also need to understand that government also gives out land that is held in trust for the people. So in that way, we engage government to ensure that something that is held in trust for the people must be respected. And where they don't listen, heed to our advice, we take them to court. We have taken government to court severally on flower farming in Tembe Ramza site. We took government to court because we feel the wetlands should not be destroyed. On Ugoma destruction, Ugoma is one of those forests in Western Uganda, and we took the government to court because we felt that that forest was so important that if it went, still would have challenges with emissions, because this is the forest that is in an area where oil and gas is being mined, and oil-related automobiles and infrastructure will be emitting a lot of emissions, which certainly require trees and forests to be absorbed. So we took them to court to better understand and guide and follow environmental and social impact assessment before such destructions do happen. So taking government to court is one of them. Creating awareness amongst communities is taken, but also we work with communities to ensure that while these trees are being cut, they also need to do boundary planting on the small plots of land that they remain with. But also we tell communities to resist issues of carbon trading, where they are establishing plantations, alienating the area, planting alien species in their environment, well knowing that eventually some of the tree species, including wildlife, will be lost. So that now they don't, trees and the small pay that is given in terms of carbon trading does not compromise their food, because food production, food sovereignty is the primary factor of security. The moment communities have food, they're able to store their own food, grow their own food, know how to grow it, where to sell it, what to eat, and the kind of food that they eat in terms of quality and quantity. To us, that is key.
That was, I think, what you said about the social impacts, the social and economic impacts of these projects is key to understanding really what the real life impacts of these projects are. And as you very well know, the promotional campaigns around these projects, right, is that, oh, it's bringing prosperity to these regions, it's bringing jobs to these regions. And so all of these myths are promoted a lot by governments. It's promoted in UN spaces, in UNFCCC spaces, that these so-called false solutions are are actually good for the community. So it's very important to hear from people like you who are on the ground, who are able to see firsthand the devastation it brings, not just ecologically or environmentally, but politically and socially, economically. it's really vital to hear about what it has done to the social fabric, of the places where these projects are being implemented.
So, for example, if you are talking about crude oil pipeline, by now it would have started a long time ago. But now, because of the several campaigns that we have on compensation, understanding biodiversity laws, looking at the route where the oil pipeline is going to go, it should avoid some sensitive areas of sacred natural sites, places of indigenous communities, because sacred natural sites are so potent sites that should be respected. Although, because of the mushrooming Christianity and all that, they look at some of these areas as satanic areas. But these are potent sites that Africans used to respect so much. So if you're talking about some of these establishments, they should respect some of these sacred natural sites because they have a very big role they play in constituting and smooth running of nature. So those are the two, and also including some plays, but also some projects that have already established, but because of the campaigns, whether they would be proposing to expand them the more, certainly there is some kind of, they curtail a bit, they reduce on the speed of expansion. And of course, to us, it would be even more worse. But because there are those checks, somehow, we'll just have some small successes. Global advocacy, you don't have, you cannot explicitly register something big, but over time, some successes are registered.
If you could tell us, if those of us who are, everybody who's listening, if the international community, if there was a way that we could support the work that you do, what would be the most helpful? How could we support these incredible projects that you are doing on the ground?
Yeah, thank you very much. Already now you're helping out by having this meeting that is globally being listened to. I think this is a plus. And secondly, we need to do more research. We can do more research on some of the pertinent issues to trace progress. For example, we have talked about oil palm. What is the progress of oil palm? What is the expansion area? Because some of these projects, they start and end. But also understanding the magnitude, but also working with, trying to understand the feel of communities. How do they feel now? How is it from the time it was established, midway, and where they are now? What is happening? So research, information sharing is very important. And when such thing happens, for example, we're planning to go to Doha, Qatar for UNFCCC COP28. So these are some of the research areas that we'll take. If we're talking about solutions to climate change, for vivo activities that are happening, we do research. And during this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate, UNFCCC COP, during those COPs, then we present those researches. We'll be having Uganda delegation, you have East African delegation, you have African delegation, you present some of these issues, and eventually in the decision making, it helps to save nature. So what we are doing now, the discussion we are having now, of course, there are other policy makers. You have people that are listening in. Certainly, they are picking something. You have people, including even those people that are into degradation, including companies themselves, they are listening in. If they're not listening in, their allies, their environmental officers, people linked to them, they listen in. And this way, it can happen. It can also help in curtailing. But largely, we would always want to do research. When we do research, we can have a bit of exchanges, people to learn from what is happening. If there are some good cases that people can learn from, it could be an opportunity for them to learn from either our leaders who are decision makers or our communities who are opinion leaders to see how conservation really takes root. That could be super helpful. And certainly would have, this meeting which we are having now, we could open it to, for example, leaders. We can engage leaders, but at some point we also give them topics to discuss. Or in a panel like this, you have some leaders also contributing and also being asked these questions, and they respond to them. And that way, it will be participatory, and we'll be working together, and we'll be working towards saving the nation, saving nature. Yeah, I think that's how it could be working together, conducting research, engaging leaders, participating in FCCC meetings, and presenting some of these very case studies that we have on ground. And that way we'll be saving nature.
Beautifully put, beautifully put. Makes me so proud to be part of, to be part of a coalition that works with you and is, yes, trying to protect and preserve nature as well as everybody who defends it.
Thank you so much, Kureeba, for that incredibly powerful interview. And I think one of the reasons why it was so powerful is because every story that you shared at its core is about the incredible power that lies at the heart of local communities. And this power, in many instances, it gets divided and conquered by multinational corporations and governments, and but when that power is actually coordinated, when that power is channelized into the good of the people, into the good of the land, then you have this, and you have these stories of success, these stories of hope, these stories of resilience, which is really what our podcast is about. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for listening. Roots of Resilience was produced by the Global Forest Coalition with support from Bread for the World. Our theme music is by the Garifuna Collective with permission from Stone Tree Records. Be sure to join us for more episodes of Roots and Resilience and visit our website at globalforestcoalition.org.